In this second part of the Data Visualizer and Dashboard Introductory, we will go over the Data Visualizer basics. We will discuss the interface, the different visualizations that can be made within DATIM, the Data Dimensions Selection pane, the key data dimensions in DATIM, including the what, which are referred to as data elements and indicators, when, which is the period, and where, which is the organization unit. We will touch on the difference between indicators and data elements within DATIM. We will also show data element and indicator groups and how these group key data elements together for analysis within DATIM. We will discuss the data element naming conventions, which we discussed briefly in data entry. We will also touch on selecting the different data dimensions. So data elements, periods, including defining a specific period type or choosing a relative period, and organization units, either by selecting them individually or by type or group. We will then create charts, alter the chart layout to define how different items look on our X and Y axes, for instance, altering the chart options to add a title, saving favorites, and then adding items to the dashboard. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and discussed the dashboard basics, we're going to jump into the data visualizer and show how we can create some of these graphs. So if you remember from the system navigation, I just hover over my apps and I find the data visualizer and click on that, and it will load the application for me. So when I load the data visualizer, this is what the interface looks like. Up top, I have the different chart types. So you'll see I have bar charts and column charts, I have line charts, I have pie charts, spider charts, and the speedometer chart, which I showed earlier. On the left-hand side, I have my data dimensions. So I have indicators, data elements, this is my what dimension. I have periods, this is my when, and I have organization units, which is my where. So these are the three data dimensions that we're going to typically be working with in any type of visualization that you create. Now be wary in DATIM that we're not always looking in indicators for our data items. In DATIM, we look for our individual indicators in the data element section of the data dimensions. This is because in DHIS2, indicators and data elements actually have different meanings. Data elements are raw pieces of data. So for instance, our number of HTC tests received. This is a raw piece of data, whereas an indicator is something like the HTC positivity percentage, which was that calculated indicator where we took the HTC positive results and divided by the HTC received results. So when we're in DATIM, just make sure that you go to data elements when you're looking for any of your raw data values. In the training environment, all of the data elements have been grouped together for easy review. So you'll see here it says select data element group. What happens is we've grouped all of the data elements together by their specific thematic areas for easier viewing during analysis. So if I click on this arrow, you will see what this looks like. Now I have many different groups, as you can see. For the training environment, we have a group called DL All Demo Data. And this includes all the data elements that are associated with training and have data against them for you to review. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that group, and it's going to load the data elements associated with that particular group. Alright, so you see them appear now. And now let's talk about the naming convention a little bit, because this is going to be important when you're running your analysis. So you can see when I look at the first data element, I have care, current, and DSD. And then right underneath it I have another data element, very similar name, care, cur, and DSD, age, sex. Now, when we're working with data elements in DATIM, we have to make sure that we select the right data element according to its naming convention. In this particular case, the data elements with NDSD, this is my numerator data element for the DSD data type. Underneath I have the numerator element with DSD data type, but this includes my age and sex disaggregations. So for instance, for HTC test we have another one, NDSD age, sex, and result. So this includes the age, sex, and the result disaggregations that are associated with that particular data item. Now if we select HTC tests, just the NDSD data element, and then we try to review any of the associated data dimensions, such as age or sex or result, it's going to return with blank data, and we'll show you what that looks like. But just remember that when you're working with the disaggregations, make sure that you select the proper data element with the disaggregations included in the name. So let's pretend that this is the chart that I'm trying to create. We can see that it includes txcurrent and txnew as the data elements that I'm interested in. They are the series on my graph with my districts as the x-axis and the number of cases as my y-axis. So let's walk through the steps to create this particular graph within DATIM. Now to select data elements, there's a couple different methods we can use. So if I click on txcurrent, I can use this single blue arrow and it will move it over from available to selected. I can also double click on a data element to move it from available to selected. If I click on the double blue arrows, it will move everything over from available to selected. And I can do the same thing on the other side to move things back. So I've selected my what dimension, which is my data element. I'm now going to select my when, which is my time period. So I go down to periods, and I click on periods, and you'll see here at the very bottom we have a list of different periods. There's a couple different ways to select periods. These bottom periods are what we call relative periods. They are relative from today's date. So currently, last financial year is set as the default. Last financial year is going to be the October 2014 financial year. We are currently in the October 2015 financial year, so it takes the last financial year relative to today's date. I can also specify the particular period that I'm interested in by selecting the period type. So if I click on the drop-down menu where it says select period type and select financial October, I will see that the October 2014 financial year is available. I can bring that over the same way as I did before. I'm going to deselect the last financial year so it's not selected twice. And I can also select my period in that manner. So I selected the what, which is my data element. I selected the when, which is my period. And now I'm going to select the where, which is my organization unit. So if I click on organization units, it's going to load the organization unit tree. Selecting organization units works very similarly as data entry. You'll see the plus icons which expand the tree. Now if you remember from that little sketch that I've made, I wanted my districts on my x-axis. So I want to select all of the districts that are located within Demoland. There's a couple different ways to select organization units as well. I can hold Control on a PC or Command on a Mac, and I can select multiple units just by clicking on them while holding down Control or Command. Now you'll see all of the districts have been selected. I can also do what we call select levels, which allows me to select a certain level in the hierarchy and select all of the organization units associated with that particular level. So let's take a look and see how that works. So I'm just going to highlight Demoland again as my country. Now if I click on this little gear icon in the corner and I change my selection mode to select levels, I'll be faced with a prompt that says select organization unit levels. If I click on this drop down, I will see that I can select all of the levels in a particular organization unit level. Now past province and region, there are generic names assigned to the organization unit levels. And this is because we know in each country, the way they've set up their organization unit hierarchy could be very different from one another. So not necessarily will every country have district and site underneath province and region. So that's why these generic names of in-country level 3 through 6 have been given to the organization unit levels. So in this particular case, I want to select all the districts, and that is in-country level 3. It is the level directly underneath my province and region. Now with Demoland highlighted, it's going to select all of the organization units within in-country level 3. If, for instance, I only highlighted food region, it would only select the districts that are associated with food region. So I just have to make sure that I'm selecting the proper parent organization unit that is associated with the data and organization units that I want to look at. Alright, so I've selected my what, my where, and my when. I'm going to go ahead and update the graph and see what it looks like. So whenever I want to see what the graph looks like, I click on this update button in the corner. Now we'll see what that looks like. Now let's go back to our sketch. And we notice that it's not quite what we wanted. We wanted the districts on our x-axis, the data on our y-axis, and we wanted txcur and txnew to be separate bars for each district. So how do we define the layout of this particular chart to make sure it matches up with what we were looking for originally? So you'll see this layout button, and if I click on that, we are brought into a pop-up dialog which allows us to alter the chart layout. So we have dimensions, filter, series, and category. Now for bar charts and line charts, the category is best referred to as the x-axis. The series is referred to as our y-axis. The filter is our aggregation operator. In this particular case, my filter is my organization units. And you can see up here, my organization units have appeared and all been aggregated separately for txcurrent and txnew in the green and blue portions of the graph respectively. My period, which is my year, is on my x-axis. And that's because it's in the category label in my chart layout. The data is correct, as I want that to be my y-axis for my series. So just so you can see what this looks like visually, we have the series as our y-axis, and it's also broken up into our various data elements. We have our category as our x-axis, and that's labeled down at the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to swap the organization units with the period so I see the districts on my x-axis. So I just drag this item and I drop it down to the category, and you'll see it swaps automatically with the period. Now that that's been done, I'm going to hit update and I'm going to see what the changes look like. Now that is much closer to what I'm looking for previously. I have my txcur and my txnew as separate items on my graph, and then I have my districts on my x-axis. Alright, so now that the chart is completed and looks like the sketch that I want to appear, we should change the options a little bit. When I look at the title, it just says October 2013 to September 2014. This is not very descriptive in nature. If I wanted to add it to the dashboard, or if I wanted to review it later on, it's not such a meaningful title. So to change the title, I click on Options, and where it says Chart Title, I will enter in a new title. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a title, and then click on Update. Now we see here up at the top, the title has changed. So I'm going to go ahead and save this favorite so I can add it to my dashboard. So if I click on Favorites, it will bring up a new prompt. Now a typical mistake that's made when adding new favorites is to enter in the favorite name where it says Search for Favorites. Now, all that does is actually search for the favorite in your existing list of favorites. So we can see when I pulled up favorites, I had many different favorites to review. When I want to add a favorite, I have to make sure to click on Add New first. Then I enter the favorite name, and then I click on Create. Alright, so that's been saved as my favorite, and I can see it here. As a next step, I want to add this chart to a new dashboard called Treatment. So I'm going to click on Home, and this is going to bring me back to the dashboard. Now, I'm going to add a new dashboard by clicking on Add and enter the name of the dashboard. So we click on Create and you'll see the new dashboard appear. I want to now add the new chart to my dashboard. So where it says up here, search for users, charts, maps, reports, and resources. I will enter in my chart title, and you'll see now I can add the chart to my dashboard. Now a common mistake is to click on the chart item. This will take you to the chart in the visualizer. We have to make sure to click on Add to actually add this item to the dashboard. So now when I click on Add, you can see I can add this item to my dashboard, and I can resize it just like we were shown. And that item has now been saved to this particular dashboard. So let's just quickly review everything we've gone over in this particular demonstration. So for starters, we went over the data visualizer interface. Up top are the different chart types that we can create within the visualizer tool, and we will create a different chart type in the next video. We went over the indicator and data element selection. In particular, we will be looking at data elements the majority of the time because this is where our raw data values are stored. We first select a data element group, and then we can select our data elements by either double-clicking or using the blue arrows up top to move items between available and selected. We then select our period. We can do this by defining our period type or by selecting a relative period down below. Lastly, we selected an organization unit, and we did this by selecting a level, but we can also do this by defining the organization units and clicking on them. In order to see our output, we simply click on Update, which allows us to review the graph in the review pane. If we go to Layout, we can define how our different options appear on this particular chart. In Options, we can add a chart title, and then we can save this as a favorite by clicking on Favorites, Add New, entering the favorite name, and then clicking on Create. Lastly, we went over adding dashboards and adding items to the dashboard. So in order to add a dashboard, we simply click on the Add button, give it a name, and click on Create. In order to add items to the dashboard, we would search for the item, and then click on Add beside the item name.